This episode is brought to you by Never Second. Never Second is a system of fueling products formulated specifically for endurance athletes that provides a blueprint for success by allowing the athletes to test, optimize, and perfect their fueling and hydration. They take the guesswork out of performance fueling. I personally use Never Second on all of my training runs and my races, and I have no GI issues, and you know exactly how many carbohydrates you're taking in based on the names of the products themselves. If you want to try Never Second out, go ahead and use code SUBHUB25 to get 25% off of your purchase. Welcome to the SubHub podcast. I'm EmKay Sullivan.
And I'm Dani Moreno. And today we're going to just kind of dive into UTMB week, fun stuff, UTMB, CCC, OCC week. I'm trying to get used to saying all of them now, to give them equal importance. And yeah, we're just going to talk to you a little bit about our races, kind of where our heads are at post-race, post-week, a few different highlights. If you haven't already, Kimber and Max have already done an incredible OCC recap where they run through the race results, standout performances, etc. So we are not going to do that since they already did it and they are our guest hosts. Thank you both, Kimber and Max. You guys crushed it. And then, yeah, we'll kind of chit chat and go from there. I guess first off, EmKay, how are you doing?
I'm tired. I was telling Dani offline before this that I am trying to figure out what to do next. And part of that right now is seeing where my body is kind of at. And I've been running really slow and my heart rate has been really high. So we're just taking it day by day right now. How are you feeling, Dani?
Yeah, I feel that with the week and not just the craziness of everyone being there, etc., but also the exposure to so many people coming in from all over the world. Once you get home, you have a chance to really assess how the body is doing. Personally, I am on the opposite end. I'm sorry. But I'm feeling better each day. I feel like most of my bad situation over there in Chamonix. But yeah, crossing my fingers. I still, when I get home, usually from big events like this, still keep my vitamin C uptake or intake up. I'm taking zinc every day, vitamin D, just in case anything decides that it wants to show up now.
Yeah, especially after flying home while also being in a hole already, with your immune system.
Yeah. I jumped on a transportation van to go to my airplane or airport. And I was sitting next to a teammate and we weren't sure how many people were going to go on this van, if it was just 3 of us or if it was going to be full. But everyone got in and I was kind of just I'll put a mask on once I get to the airport if everyone kind of seems like they're good. And the last person to get onto the bus was just so sick. And she sat right next to me. And the whole time I was just trying to cover my face and lean over. And she just kept coughing. And I kept looking at my teammate and both of us just looked petrified because your immune system is so compromised when you travel. And then the girl fell asleep with her mouth open, just on my shoulder and was snoring. And I was just freaking out. It was so bad. And I just kept pulling my shirt over my face. So yeah, fingers crossed. That's also part of the reason why I'm just trying to sleep as much as possible, because I just had this fan of germs in my face. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, if you guys kept up with the Good Morning Mont Blanc last week, then you probably have already heard about Dani and I's race experiences, but I guess we can kind of roll over them a little bit just in case our SubHub audience is a little different. But yeah, Dani and I both unfortunately did not finish the race at OCC. And Dani was sick before the race, very obviously sick. And I don't really know what is going on with me personally, but yeah, after about 10 miles, I just felt pretty lifeless. And looking back on my Strava compared to some other people's Stravas, my heart rate was so high for those first 10 miles, in the 170s, which is not normal. And so something's going on. Don't know what it is. My heart rate's still high. I'm probably just like sick of some sort. And it's not like symptomatic, I guess, other than the fact that I feel really tired and my heart rate's high. But yeah, the only positive of dropping out at Col de Balme was that Jen Lichter was also there with me, and we got to like cry on the way down together and tell each other that we weren't terrible at what we do, even though we were both feeling terrible at what we do. Yeah, Dani, what about you? How was your day out there?
Yeah. Was that your first DNF? That was my first DNF.
That was my second DNF, but the first one was like, I was running a race in Sweden and I rolled my ankle pretty bad and then kept going and kept rolling it over and over again until finally I was like, actually, I can't walk. So that one at least like made sense in my heart to stop. Whereas like, I think I said this on the Mont Blanc or Good Morning Mont Blanc. The worst part about DNFing was like walking in and being like, yeah, I'm done. And they were like, oh my God, do you need something? And they like brought the medical team out and I was like, nope, just need to stop. And they're like, are you sure you want to stop? I'm like, yes, I need to stop. And they're like, okay, you look fine. I'm like, I'm not, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, I had a similar thing. When I dropped too, they asked me if my body was okay. And I said, yes, but my heart is broken. The guy's like, all right, you don't need to be so dramatic about it. Yeah, like EmKay said, I got sick before. It was kind of weird. I was on my period, thought I was having cramps. Luckily I don't usually get cramps, maybe like once every couple of years for a period, and it was just tripping me out. And I was out on a run with Toni McCann, who eventually was the winner of the race. And I just kept telling her, I'm like, yeah, it's really weird. Like my stomach really hurts a lot. And so we were trying to problem solve together. Maybe you need to drink more electrolytes. Maybe you need to yeah, that makes sense. Maybe you need to do this. And so I tried all these things, and then, 12 hours later was on the toilet nonstop, emptying my bladder, stomach from probably 3 days worth of food leading up to that. So yeah, needless to say, when I got on the line, I had a good idea how it was going to go, and it went shitty. No pun intended. And so in our race, there's kind of 4 main climbs. The first one is by far the fastest climb. A lot of it has to do with the fact that it's a lot of asphalt and you're just getting out too in the race. And so if you want to be competitive, you should get up the climb in a pretty good time.
Yeah, like 45 minutes is kind of what we were all shooting for, I think.
Yeah. So 45, 55 minutes is like, we'll put you in the race at least. And when I say put you in the race, like if you're trying to go for like top 10. And yeah, so immediately as the race started, I just had no energy and was eating. But long story short, I go to Champay Lock and I get there in like 70 minutes, which is like 15 minutes lower than I did the previous year. And my team manager's cheering me on. She's like, you look great. And I was like, don't lie to me. And I went up to her like a child, not knowing what to do, going to their mom and just like held my arms. I was like, I can't feel my arms. She's like, it's okay. You got this. I was like, I can't feel my legs. And so I just like calmed down for a second, decided to keep going to Triant, and maybe 10 minutes after I left her, I was like, all right, I already know the answer. So yeah, first DNF really, really shook me in the moment. I don't think I've ever, I'm a crier, so this means a lot when I say this, but I was like vigorously crying, like audibly crying of how it wasn't even that I was sad. I was just really mad. I don't think I've ever been that mad. I've had races where I'm like, dang, I could have done better, but I just felt so out of my control and
cheated.
Cheated, I think is what it was. I'm sure like EmKay, it's like we do all this stuff and this is one of our biggest races of the year, if not the biggest race for our distance. And you're just kind of shaking your head wondering, of all the races, why did it have to be this one? Luckily, my team manager was there too and gave me a lot of words of inspiration. That's when I went to the guy and told him my heart was broken. And yeah, I just was like, like the emoji that has like the really sad face. I just felt like I looked like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that I was sobbing. Like
Yeah.
I was crying as I was like walking the final mile to Col de Balme because I had like decided that it was time to drop out. And then the first person that I saw that knew me and like cheered for me, I just broke down, like full sobbing. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, like, are you okay?" And I'm like, "I'm not okay," And it was like the whole day, like anytime anybody asked, like, "Oh my gosh, how are you doing?" Like full sob. I could like just couldn't even stop it. It was it was the worst. I was on the phone with Tommy and then my mom and
Tommy's
then
her
Rick.
husband.
Yeah, Tommy, my husband. And like all 3 times was just like them asking me what was happening and me just being like, "I don't know." So it was, yeah, I feel you. Like it wasn't just like crying, it was full sob.
Yeah. Yeah. It was intense. It was real intense. And then we had some cameras by us too. And I was just giving them the full experience. I was like, this is some really good cinematic footage right here. But yeah, it was, so that happened. And then for EmKay and Jen Leichter, they were so much further into the race that you guys took like a cable car down. And so kind of by that point, the race for them, it was probably done. Like the men's podium was set and stuff like that. Whereas for me, I dropped out so much earlier that I actually had time to watch the end of the race in Argentière and then the finish. And it was just really funny because at Argentière, I put on some slippers because I don't know, that's all I had left. And I was just trying to get over to this one watch spot as fast as I could. And I saw the men come through, and it also just made me cry in a good way because, obviously you guys felt this too. I was missing out. I was like, I should be in there. I should be fighting. I should be pushing this race, helping, like doing something. But every time I cheered someone on, Stian was first, where I was like, "Come on, Stian." And he looked and kind of smiled. "Dani, is that you?" I'm like, "Yeah, just keep going." He's like, "What are you doing there?" But he's full on sprinting mode and what the heck? And then the next person, Francesco, Jesh and Robbie, they realize it's me too. And they're like, "What are you doing on the side?" I'm like, how are all these people realizing what's going on while they're in the middle of their race? And I felt it in my heart that much more of how close this sport is. Like, how many times would you see that in like a road marathon where somebody drops out? No, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's not to say they're bad people, but it's just like we have such close friendships with all these people that we all genuinely care about each other, especially in the hard moments. And then freaking Toni, I see her coming in and I immediately start crying because now it's more personal. It's our race, right? It's like what we trained for. But at the same time, she's my teammate. And so quickly, I feel like we're kindred spirits. Like we kind of just get each other every conversation we have. It's just our friendship is developing quickly. And we locked eyes and she like legitimately stopped in her race and we hugged for like 2 seconds. And I just started I was like, "Stop hugging me." I'm like, "Yeah." She had a pretty sizable lead at that point. But it was just kind of wild.
Yeah. And that was like every single woman that passed me was like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" Like people that I knew and people that I didn't know. And I was just like, "No, I'm not, but thank you. Like, bye." Like, have fun. And the other thing that was funny that Dani and I both talked about is I had a couple of people pass me that were like, "I love your podcast." And I was like, "Thanks."
Which was
Enjoy your race.
Sweet. Yeah. Have a good one. Do you want me to make space for you on the course? My favorite was this girl, Melody. Shout out to Melody from Canada because I started asking her about herself. And she kind of started running by me. And this is before the downhill to Triant. She kind of looks at me and she keeps running. Then she like kind of shakes her head back. "Are you Dani Moreno?" It's like, "Yep. That's me." And she's like, "What are you doing back here?" It's like, just chilling. But she said she was a huge fan of the pod. So thanks, Melody. It made me feel better in the moment because it was one of those kind of meta moments where, oh, this is so much bigger than us.
Yeah.
Like this race, this community, all those little things started adding up so quickly as to this is going to hurt and like hurt the heart for a bit. But I know I'm going to get through it because of moments like this. When we get home, right, to Reno and Mammoth, it's probably going to hurt a little bit more. But at least in that time, I'm like, I'm going to be able to get through this, which, segue for me, it was the team hugely immediately as I finished, right? Like going and seeing Jesh and Robbie turn their heads and every single one of my teammates asking if I'm okay while they're in the midst of battling it out, and Toni giving me a hug. And then at the finish line, me and her shared like a very long, where we were both crying hug, because you just kind of like, like you see it in each other, as runners, like how much it means to us. And for you, obviously with Helen.
Yeah. Well, first off, it was like my team also, like, the first thing that I think about, like when I'm dropping out, is like, wow, I've really disappointed my team. Like I've let them down. And I get back to the house and everybody's just like, don't say that. That's ridiculous. Like, we know that you're amazing. This is just one day, and giving me hugs, telling me that like, and it's like the whole craft corporation was there, and they're like, EmKay, we know you better than this. Like, no. But then, yeah, like going straight into helping Helen the next day with CCC, like I needed that. I'm glad that I had already committed to that, because it like really changed the weekend for me. I think otherwise I literally would have just been like sitting around on Instagram being like, wow, that person did really well, and that person did great, and I dropped out. But instead it was like, okay, we're with Helen, we're going to the next aid station. We got to go to this aid station. We got to get all our stuff ready. And then like when she finished, it was like, instead of sobbing for myself, I was crying tears of joy, just like seeing her get her day. And I was glad that like we both had stuff like that in our back pocket. But I think it's important to note also that like I'm still not okay from it. Like every run that I've gone on and felt bad, like I just like, I'm even trying not to cry right now. Like I'm still definitely grieving, like dropping out of that race, which is sometimes feels ridiculous, but it's like, I mean, we just worked so hard. And especially like when it is what you do, like this is my job now, like it feels even worse, I think, because it's like, oh, am I even any good at this? And it's just one day, but it's hard to take that hit and just realize that you can't always be on. Like as much as you want to be, you're not always going to have the best day.
Yeah, it's I 100% agree with you. It's okay to not be okay. I ran into a friend today who I was on a a couple teams with actually, and I was telling her, I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling better. And she turned around and I almost started crying. She's like, Dani, it's okay if you're not still okay. And I was like, yeah, I get that for sure. Just trying to
try to put on a good face. You're like, I'm fine. It's like,
yeah,
I'm not.
And yeah, it goes back to she knows and she understands this sport. I think any athlete, anybody who's super passionate about, but obviously we feel even more deeply connected to people we have stood on the start line with or are in this, just like, yeah, the sport of running itself. It so much builds us up as much as it breaks our hearts. And I just keep reminding myself of trying to think of what I would tell somebody else who, has a hard moment like this on the biggest stage. And it sucks that it was that race. But there's more, and we are so much better because we even started or we got on the line, and we're so much better, honestly, for pulling out like that. Yeah. I think that's something that's extremely underrated for appreciating athletes who understand their bodies enough that they can put their pride and ego aside. And we both could have finished. It would not have been pretty, but that's something that we both, I'm sure, I definitely was thinking about. I was like,
I thought about it.
I was like, should I just do this and finish last? I don't know.
Yeah.
Should I be out here for 6 to 8 hours though?
Because
It's
I
like,
had the thought that was like, people are going to think that I dropped out just because it wasn't going well, like because I wasn't in a position that I felt like I should be in. And like I felt self-conscious about that. And so I was like ready to walk to Chamonix for like 4 hours. But then actually Stephanie Howe passed me and, you know, she asked me like if I was okay, all this stuff. And I was like, no, but I'm going to make it to the finish line. And this is like on the climb to Col de Balme. I was still thinking this. And she was like, yeah, I'm not feeling good either. She's like, but my ego's not big enough. I don't think that I have to make it to the finish line. She didn't say it quite like that, but I was like, oh shit, I don't need to go to the finish line. Like maybe she's right. And that was when I started to think like, maybe this would be a bad idea. Actually, like, I'm just like, yes, I don't feel like I use my fitness in this race, but am I going to just actually waste it by spending an entire day out here instead of like just regrouping, taking the tram down, and then maybe finding another race that I can do?
yeah, I know. That's a very good way to frame it, honestly, is we probably would have wasted our fitness by being out there for 6 to 8 hours and
putting yourself in a hole for no reason.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Because I almost started to feel better right before, like a couple days later. Like I was like kind of waiting to see, am I just thinking this or is the body coming back? And I think it was the day before I left, I was out on a jog and I knew immediately, dang, I could be on the start line today. And I don't know if I'd be at my best, but I would be very close to what I came here to do. And it started messing with my head. Did I come up with that? Did I really just experience that? Because this is just stupid. How quickly that rebounded. But again, I went back to, dang, if I would have pushed through that race, I might have not even felt this today.
Yeah.
It might have been weeks from now where I finally felt good. Yeah.
Yeah. And with stomach stuff, honestly, there's always the chance that like, yeah, you feel better, but you get 3 hours into that race and like your potassium levels are depleted, like all these things are depleted and you haven't caught up yet, even though you feel like you have on a short run. And then it's just even worse.
Yeah.
So yeah, all this to say that we're definitely still bummed, but there are positives, you know, being around a team. I don't know about you. I mean, that was my first UTMB experience, being at the finish line and like watching people like the Americans, like Courtney and Jim win was so cool. Like you're not going to experience that honestly anywhere outside of UTMB. Like the crowds of people that are there to experience this finish line was just like mind blowing to me.
Yeah, no, same. I think for me, it was my second experience and not completing the race definitely opened my eyes to being on the other end of it. For me, I just feel that I patiently waited to go to Chamonix probably for like 3 years. Part of that was like the distance of the event, but also just not feeling quite ready to be at something that big yet. I thought I might feel overwhelmed. And so learning about other people getting sick over the years, in my head, I was just thinking how I could prevent that for years and years. And so anyways, I kind of chuckle at myself now. I'm like, there's no way these other runners never thought of this. I'm not the first one to think you have to boost your immune system. But for so many years, I'm like, maybe I know something different. I don't know. But now, yeah, I can easily laugh at myself. It's like, I'm finally on the other end of that. Last year I wasn't, and there was other runners that got sick, runners that didn't even get to compete, like my teammate Sabrina Stanley. And this year she did. So just having like that extra lens of empathy, which I feel like I'm always pursuing, I feel like a better person. And yeah, now watching Americans like Courtney and Jim, it took him 5 years to reach what was his goal, right? Everyone's goal is going to be different. And so for me to even have thought that maybe the second year is where I can knock it out of the park, is pretty cool, right? Like to think you can get that close that quick. But yeah, it just gives me so much respect for him for doing it for 5 years. And then Zach Miller in second was crazy. The men's CCC 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, last year we were talking everyone was talking about the American women in CCC. And this
And
year,
the American men weren't even a thought.
Weren't even a thought. And
Yeah.
the men threw down this year. Like, that's a sweep if I ever saw one.
Yeah. Big
and
time
then,
shout out to Rachel Green. She's literally like 11 months postpartum and gets 6th place here. It's a huge deal. Same with Daniela Oymus, like both of them, very close to having children, 5th and 6th, absolute crushers, legends.
Yeah. And I forget Tyler Green too. Another top 10 coming off a Western. Like, that to me is now the most successful men's Western UTMB double for an American man. So that's pretty cool.
Katie Scheid. I mean, like, to win UTMB last year and then to come second here this year, that's no joke. She's been working on that speed. I'm sure she started working on her speed for Western States and then just like sharpened it up for this race because, wow, I was impressed.
Yeah, me too. I was extremely impressed with her. And the fact that she had only less than a minute between her and Yao Miao. And Yao Miao just got 4th at Sears now, like top 5.
She was 4th,
Yeah.
And second at Mont Blanc Marathon before that.
Yeah. So Yao Miao is having an incredible year. So huge congrats to Katie Scheid. I'm curious what she's going to do now. Like,
I know.
I mean,
like, is she going to go back up or is she going to kind of dabble a little bit more like in the middle?
Yeah. And like, is she even going back to Western states? I'm very curious. Like, my mind kind of went to, was this her first year at attempting the double? And now she's going to try and do like Western States UTMB or Western States CCC. She just wanted to see how her body would recover. But yeah, I would say now watching this, like, if she does want to do Western States UTMB, she would definitely put on a good show for that. Shout out to also in OCC, Jeshrin Small. He's one of my first American man. The American men honestly didn't get a lot of love from any of us in the preview episodes, and he came in with 5th. And I mean, it went Stian Ingerman, Francesco Pupi, Antonio, and
then Giashin.
No, Giashin's in CCC. This is OCC.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
You're right.
I forget who was 4th though, but anyways, like, Jeshrin just catapulted himself basically, that he should be someone that's always in the conversation now.
It was a Chinese athlete in 4th, but I can't remember his name.
Okay. We can look it up. But if history repeats itself, Toni McCann got 5th. And we'll see what happens there. Helen, provide some color on Helen.
Oh, what a crusher, man. I was so proud of her. I was literally crying as she was coming down the finish because she worked so hard all day in 2nd place chasing Ingvild. And I had a feeling Emily was going to pass her like the last time that I saw the two of them, because Helen was like, you could see in her face that she was like suffering, but she just was not going to let that get in her way. And Emily looked great. But Helen got passed with a mile to go by 4th place. And she told me, she was like, absolutely not. I have worked way too hard all day for this. And Helen is a jogger, not a runner, supposedly, but she outkicked that woman and beat her by 20 seconds.
I love that.
So, Helen, as much as you say you're a jogger, your performance at Speed Goat and your last mile at CCC, no way. Absolutely a runner.
Yeah, that race got me super hyped because, yes, then that was the next day after OCC, and CCC and UTMB start within the same day. But we were just going all around the course watching this race develop. And we knew when Ingvild had moved into 1st. And all of us were just like, what is going to happen with Helen? Like, because she had a huge smile on her face. She looked great, like, every time we saw her. And it wasn't until Valersine where I was like, oh no. And I felt my oh my gosh, I can't even think of the word. Allegiance? I don't know. But I was cheering on Helen. I was cheering on Emily. Basically, I was like, I don't care who gets second. It's going to be awesome. And if this is the podium, that is a sick podium. Like, and for me too, Emily, just something about Ingvild, I had an idea she would win. She just ran like 2:38 during her training block, which to me just proved that she was really, really, really fit. Yeah. And Emily was coming off of Western States, has proven she could do the UTMB Western States double, but to go something faster, like Katie Scheid, to me is just like honestly really impressive. And so I was curious to see how she would do. And then what's it called? Yeah, Helen coming off of what was a crazy speed goat time. Just knew she was going to be throwing down as well. Yeah, that was a sick race. I loved that race.
It was a lot of fun. And it was like, we were on the edge of our seat like all day.
Yeah, they raced that from the gun. And
yeah,
I was looking at, what I was going to say is Helen, what place did she finish last year?
13th.
Yeah, that's huge. Going from 13th to the podium just goes to show, like, if you know the course, but more so if you just know what type of work to put in. She's also extremely talented. Like, you can make big gains like that. So that was just really cool.
Yeah, definitely. And she broke kind of in the same spot that she broke last year. So there's still like room for improvement there, which is crazy to think about, like getting third place, like that final hill before Valersine. So I guess second to last hill is like also where she kind of broke down last year. So she's just got to work on that like section of the course, and she's scary.
Yeah. And she's pretty young too, right?
She's like 26.
Yeah, that's wild. One more shout out about Helen. She hilariously declined a Western States ticket on the stage. I feel like that whole scene should just be a meme for like,
it's so funny.
Scott Jurek or Aid Station Fireball, but essentially they're like trying to hand her the ticket. And for so many people, that's the dream. Like they chase golden tickets for races, for seasons, for years. But I would say more so in recent years, we've seen a couple declines, which is totally fine. Like you earned it. You could say no if you don't really feel in it. But they're doing this on one of the biggest podium stages in the world.
And they didn't ask before.
They didn't ask.
I feel like sometimes they do that.
Yeah, but they're basically trying to hand her the ticket, and Helen says, no, thank you. Just trying to push it away. I don't want it. But it's just really funny because they're building it up to be this, and she wins a golden ticket. But anyways, just
and everybody else like graciously like takes it, and she's just like, nope, don't want it. And they're like, can you please just hold it for the picture? So I'm curious to see who takes that golden ticket, because I don't know if fourth ticket or if it's continuing to roll down. So that'll be interesting. But on the note of incredible performances, right after this, we're actually going to chat with OCC Women's Champion Toni McCann. And Toni is one of Dani's teammates. So take it away with that intro.
Yes. On the note of incredible performance, if you know anything about UTMB scores, I feel that we both knew this as soon as she ran the time based on what we were kind of estimating. So quick note, in OCC this year, if it seems like all the times were faster, they were. And a large reason, not the only reason, but a large reason for that is that there was what I would consider a major course change based on the course that I ran last year and then seeking this one out. So essentially the third hill went from, it was less, I forget how much less, like a K or something, 2K?
I think we almost lost 2K in distance,
2K, but it was very technical last year, like through the jungle. You were kind of like boulder hopping for like half a mile sort of thing. So it took out the most technical part of the course and it made it into what is a really nice climb that you can grind up. There's like a weird grassy part that only lasts like a quarter of a mile. But then you get up onto the single track that we used to get onto, but you get onto it after the technical part's already done. With that being said, when EmKay and I ran it, I was guessing maybe like 30, maybe 40
I would have said
minutes.
30 max, honestly. I would have said 20 to 30 minutes.
Oh, I was thinking like 30 to 40 because you ran it in like an hour. And
yeah,
like
I guess. Yeah.
Racing it took me like just under 90 minutes. So assuming you're racing faster, right?
Yeah.
Like 30, we'll say 30, 40 minutes. If you're just on 140 minutes. But again, that's like the high end. It's hard to really say. Okay. So if you take Shayla's time from last year, which was 6:10.
Yep.
Right. And you minus 30 minutes, that's 5:40, right?
Yeah. And 40 minutes would be 5:30.
Would be 5:30. Yeah. So when me and EmKay were texting back and forth, I was thinking the winner's going to come in around 5:30. Maybe if they're on one, they're going to come in around 5:30. And then everyone else will kind of be like 5, 10, 15 minutes. And then the whole podium will be under 6 hours. Toni McCann ran 5:18.
5:18.
She ran 12 minutes faster than what I thought the winner was going to run.
And just to nail in the coffin this, the men's race was only 30 minutes faster than last year. 30 to 40 minutes, which was exactly what we kind of thought. Yeah. So the fact that she ran 52 minutes faster than last year's time, that's incredible.
Insane. Yeah. So that's all to lead up to her
intro.
Yeah. I just wanted to see now really quick, for reference, what Katie Scheid. So Katie Scheid ran under 5:30 also. She ran 5:26 and then 5:27.
Which feels about right.
Which that felt about right. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty wild. Okay. So Toni McCann coming up. Toni McCann is a professional runner for Adidas Terrex. She's from South Africa originally, but now she's based in Chamonix, France. She began her year with a strong win at Transvulcania 48K. This is actually the race that qualified her for OCC, and she ran that in a new course record. She then had a couple of injuries, also had a weird accident where she broke her collarbone and wasn't able to compete at the World Championships. However, she then rebounded and she had another strong win at Davos 43K, leading into OCC this year. This all ultimately primed her for a dominant win, as we just said, at this year's version of OCC, where she was the winner and she also placed 22nd overall. Now for Toni McCann.
Hey, Toni, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. This feels like a gals get together.
We would say the same too. Yeah, we're definitely both so excited to have you on the show. We know people will love listening about your most recent race, but we'd love to dive into also just like your background and everything that led up to what EmKay and I would say is a very historic performance at OCC. But the first thing we'd love to chat with you about, which is also very special to my heart, is you joining Team Terrex. And when did that happen? Why did that happen, etc.?
Yeah, so I joined Terrex. I can't believe it was this long ago already, because it kind of feels like the other day, but I joined them at the beginning of last year, so 2022. And yeah, at the time I wasn't looking for a new sponsor. I was happy with where I was and I thought I was, in a good space. And then Terrex came along and I'd seen them that year at UTMB because I'd been there in 2021 as well. And I remember looking at this team of people and being like, oh my gosh, they're so cool. Like, how rad would it be to be a part of a team of people like that? So when I got the email and it was like, hey, would you be interested in having this chat? I was like, hell yeah, like definitely. And it took all of one conversation with Robert, our team manager, and I was like, sold. Sign me up. When can I do this thing? So yeah, 2021, and definitely no regrets, not an ounce. So happy. And yeah, having you join the team at the beginning of the year was so cool, Dani. We were all really, really excited about it.
That's awesome. And I guess I don't know, who were you sponsored by before Adidas?
I was with the ASICS trail running team.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, just a year with them. So it's always hard when you move sponsors. It's not something that I take lightly by any means, but I think, when an offer like Terrex comes along and they offer such a unique like team aspect, and coming from a background of team sports, that was something that really appealed to me more so than, all the other frills that come with the contract. That team element was really enticing. And it's definitely for me, like the biggest perk.
Yeah, I would say I had a very similar experience watching the team at last year's OCC, so 2022. Maybe that's where they get you. But yeah, having a similar background in my heart, just knew I wanted to be a part of it. So, how long were you a sponsored trail runner before you got the message from Adidas Terrex?
Well, it depends what you mean by sponsored. I think, I was an ambassador for I was an ambassador for actually Ultra. Ultra were my first ever pair of running shoes, and I still to this day love them. My good old King MTs, best grip in town. I think they discontinued that shoe, unfortunately. But so I was kind of like an ambassador with the local South African Ultra team. And then at the beginning of 2021 or end of 2020, I got a message from ASICS to join their trail running team. And I guess growth, the progression of the sport has meant that, contracts grow, and I guess
That's so funny. I feel like we were probably on the Ultra Ambassador team at the same time, because that was like my first thing too. But over here in the US, obviously,
the Ultra Red team.
Yeah, Ultra Red team from like 2017 to 2021 or 2020 or something like that. So
definitely overlap. Then if we go back and look at those spreadsheets where they added us all on, I don't know if you ever got one of those. Yeah, we'll probably see each other's names there.
That's so funny. So tell me a little bit about your sports background in general, because you're a trail runner now, but you said that you were your background is more in team sports. So where did you start? How did you get into trail running? Give us all the details.
I guess I've always been a sporty kid. I played pretty much any sport that you can name. I at least tried it at school. Interestingly, track was never one of those sports. I truly hated track. It was my least favorite thing ever. Sorry, Dani. I think you both actually come from like a road and track background, right? Yeah.
Doesn't mean we liked it.
So I played a lot of team sports, and throughout, primary school, I dabbled in everything. And then in high school, I kind of specialized in field hockey. I, played club hockey, school hockey, and then progressed to playing provincial and national team hockey. And that was kind of always where I thought I would end up. I guess back then the dream was to become a professional hockey player. But professional hockey is even more niche than professional trail running. So that's like really an unrealistic dream. And to be honest, if I'm truly honest with myself, I was probably never good enough anyway. But in university, I ended up deciding that it wasn't for me, and I kind of focused on my studies a little bit more. I became a bit of a sedentary human being in my university years, which looking back is a very interesting phase in my life. And then I kind of took up running primarily because my boyfriend at the time was really into mountain biking, and I couldn't afford a mountain bike. So I was like, I'm just going to run next year. That's kind of how I got into running, and entered a couple really low-key races, and was like, kind of good at this. Let's start training a little bit. And I guess that was probably in 2016. Guess I never looked back from then.
Isn't EmKay also a field hockey player?
I was going to say that. Field hockey or lacrosse. To me, they're similar realms, right? Because lacrosse is you're up here, and then field hockey. But yeah.
We got to start recruiting from the field hockey world, it seems.
I know.
Yeah. I promise you, it gives you like really good proprioception. Like you've got pretty quick like reflexes, like a lot of plyometric power. I think it's a great sport for building like strong legs.
Yeah.
But EmKay, I think, was definitely a field hockey player. I actually think she played for Netherlands. Might be wrong.
Wow. I think even Megan Roche back in the day, she was also field hockey or lacrosse, which, when you think about it, makes a lot of sense, because there's also a lot of soccer players, which, it's similar mechanisms, in the overall game, short burst of energy, proprioception, getting used to kind of like different side movements. You're not just like forward linear all the time. So seeing that translate over to trail running, that's where we need to be recruiting for sure. Just out of curiosity, because you are you grew up in South Africa. You're based from South Africa. You're not based there anymore. You're in Chamonix. But is that like a very popular sport there? Like, are a lot of the youth doing field hockey?
Yeah, it's like school sports. Like the three main school sports would probably be like cricket and rugby for the guys, and field hockey and netball for the girls. Yeah, field hockey is pretty big there.
That's so interesting because those are sports that are definitely not happening in the US. I mean, they obviously are in some like small niche way, but definitely not the popular ones.
Yeah, it's kind of funny in the US. It's kind of seen as like a wealthy person's sport, like East Coast, Yale, Harvard sort of thing. You're very posh. Yeah. That's awesome. So you start to trail run because you're like, screw the mountain bike. I can do this on my feet. And you are doing this in South Africa, correct? Mm-hmm. And I've never been there. EmKay, have you been to South Africa?
No,
but my understanding is that the trails are very technical, like in a different way, maybe from other parts of the world. And so did you find that you naturally could just move your way through them pretty smoothly, or was it a learning process?
I mean, I think there's always an element of having to learn a little bit about, where to put your feet, how different terrains react when you move through them. But I think I picked it up really quickly, and it did always feel quite natural to me. And I think that was partly because, growing up as a kid, my dad really did bring us up in the outdoors, or my parents. But my dad particularly, we went fishing along riverbeds where we were scrambling over rocks and playing in sand on the beach, and we were always outside. So I think, I would definitely say my childhood played a role in like my ability to adapt to the terrain quite quickly. But also, background in field hockey and just being a naturally like kind of stronger person. But yeah, they're technical, and it takes some confidence to move through it sometimes, which whenever I go back, I get reminded how smooth the trails in Europe are. I'm like, man, we are so lucky here.
And that's so funny because, like every time I go to Europe, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many roots and rocks. I'm so used to just like trails that are like buttery smooth, like, because when I first started trail running was basically when I went to college. And I remember the first week, there's like barely any rocks on our trails, but I ate shit pretty much every day because I had never had to pick up my feet before. I was always just like shuffling on the roads.
Nice. I mean, to be fair, I think the biggest crashes I've had are on like buttery smooth trails where you like twig your foot on the stone this big, and you're like, what did I even trip on? Like on the really technical yeah, your brain switches off and you're like, I'm cruising, and then
exactly. So you're gaining confidence, you're learning on the trails. When do you decide to sign up for a trail race? Because I remember personally when I was trailing, I was like, I didn't even know there's competition to this. So how did that process look like? And was it exciting? Did you want to compete, or was it, tell us that story.
I think the first trail race I ever did was a night race on like a wine farm that my sister made me do with her. And I remember hating it. Like, there's so many hills. This is ridiculous. But I guess being a competitive person, I was like, maybe I could do better. Maybe I could beat the person next time. And there's like a little wine farm trail series that I had signed up for. So I kind of did all the races in that. And I guess it started super low key with like 10, 15K trail races. And a year later, I was like, cool, I'm going to sign up for a marathon. Just going to do it. So it progressed pretty quickly, actually. And once I realized.
Was this a trail marathon or a road marathon?
It was a trail marathon. It was the 2018 Golden Trail Series finale. It was in South Africa, actually, at the Otter African Trail Run. And I was like, I'm going to throw my name in that hat. And
that's a pretty big jump, but I like it. I like the confidence.
Wait, was this, did you get third that year?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible.
I mean, I think it was part like beginner's luck, and part just like absolutely no idea what I'm doing. So I'm just going to go and run and like see what happens. And I guess it worked out.
And who was it? Holly, Paige, and Ruth that were ahead of you? And so and then you were third. Yeah. That's for your first trail marathon. Yeah.
We call that serendipity. Now I call those two people teammates, which is really cool. Actually, it's so cool.
Yeah. Meant to be, definitely. So you weren't, I'm assuming then you got sponsored after that, or were you sponsored then?
I was kind of an ambassador before then. I had won some like local races that people had noticed me at. So like I was still a no one, and I still am, like, trail running. So I had gotten an ambassadorship with a brand before then with Ultra. And guess I was kind of sponsored. I don't know. Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah. So 2018 goes, you get onto pretty big podium, first trail marathon. Going into 2019, how does that kind of shape what you're thinking about yourself and your relationship to the sport?
It gave me a lot of confidence, but also I think that came too soon. I actually was thinking about this the other day. I kind of wish in some ways that, obviously I'm really grateful that the race panned out the way it did, because it meant that I got this platform into this trail world that I didn't have before. And the next year, the Golden Trail Series had invited me back to do some of their races, which I was super keen for. But I think I was too young in the sport to kind of realize what that meant and how to deal with that pressure. So thinking about it, my 2019, it was actually a bit of a fail. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but I was going to say it's a shit show. And yeah, I mean, I got injured before my first race in Zagama, or at Zagama. So I went in very underprepared, and then I stayed for the Mont Blanc Marathon, which was probably the biggest bonk fest I've ever had in my entire life. Serious PTSD. The trail between Flagey and Plan Prat. Oh my gosh. It's the longest 5Ks I've ever run. Terrible. And then the Dolomites. And I kind of went home after that stint in Europe, and I was just like, maybe I'm not cut out for this. It was a massive wake-up call for like the level of actually trail running. Because, within South Africa, as much as the sport is really big and the community is amazing there, the level hasn't quite caught up to European standards. Or we've just got very different trails. So we're equipped for different types of different styles of running. So yeah, moving to Europe this year has definitely given me, spending time here last year and the year before as well, has definitely given me an insight into how to train for this specific European terrain. But also at like the level that you need to be to compete at this level. So yeah, lots of learning in 2019. I definitely don't write it off, but I think it was a good wake-up call. Definitely.
So your confidence kind of gets rocked in 2019, and then 2020 happens where there's like nothing going on really. Mm-hmm. So were you kind of spending that time like trying to just get back to, where you kind of were in 2018? Or were you just like, I'm just going to run around, and then once everything opens back up, we can start racing again? Like, was that kind of a year for you to regroup?
Yeah, I definitely think so. COVID was pretty harsh in South Africa, and we weren't allowed to leave our houses. So I was stuck in my apartment. I was on my own that year. Thank goodness I had managed to wangle my way to get an indoor trainer before everything kind of shut down. So I was sitting on an indoor trainer for, I think it was in the end, like 7 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that. And then when things opened up, obviously, internationally, things were still really closed up. So the only real race that year was, I think it was the Otta again. And I ran that year. And yeah, I guess it was just a year to grow. As with everyone, there wasn't that much going on. So it was just making the best of a really bad situation. And yeah, I think I definitely came into 2021 with a better mindset and better work ethic. I still don't think I really knew what I was doing, but that's okay. Every year was just growth.
Yeah. No, that's super fascinating. I feel that for a lot of runners that, I don't know how to say this, like, you know, get contracts maybe in other parts of the world where they are pretty dominant. And then you start to hear that, oh no, the scene is in Europe, at least right now where the sport is at. And then you go over there, and I would say like probably 90% of us get our butts kicked the first time we go over to Europe. There's a couple people that figure it out, and I'm crazy impressed by them. But yeah, I had a similar experience where my first races over there, I was just kind of questioning everything. I'm like, am I a mountain runner? Am I a trail runner? I just got my butt kicked hard. And what just happened? So I think it's good to experience that for sure. But at least like over the years, also learn that with the sport growing, eventually it is going to be not just Europe, and being able to run on terrains like South Africa is quickly going to become something that's highly sought after too, and other parts of the world as well. But I think that's just so good for our listeners to hear. Like, I think there's this perception sometimes that when a person wins a race, it's like, oh, and maybe they have or haven't heard of you before. They're like, oh, she came out of nowhere. It's like, no, Toni has been working on this for years, and it's been a process. And you've been growing each year and figuring stuff out. And then that led to, there's just so much more that came before OCC. So I think it's great for people to hear that. So let's go to 2021. Do you do the Golden Trail World Series? Do you decide to go back? No. Okay.
What did I do in 2021?
I know. You did OCC for the first time.
Yeah.
Yes,
and
that was the
Sears
first year that I attended. Yes. Got my butt kicked at Series and all as well. Man, that race really does require very specific focus. You know, I at that stage, I still hadn't quite understood what it meant to run up 2,000 meters of vert and like actually run up 2,000 meters of vert. It's not just a hike. Like you have to be able to run that and then keep running on some really rolling terrain that they call flat, which is not flat. If you've ever run Sierra Zanel, when you get to the top of the climb, it is not flat. So yeah, that was an interesting race. Look, I was at the end of the day, I was happy with my time. Like I snuck in under 3:20, and I think I got like 21st or something, which, you know, isn't great, but it was again another learning experience, and I think all of these things have, you know, built the house that I'm currently building still. But that was the first year that I did OCC, and I guess it went, you know, again, for my first attempt at this race, it wasn't bad. 14th place, an okay-ish time. You know, I think I went away with that going, cool, like I have a lot to work on, but I actually believe that I can do this. Like, I feel like I can compete with these people. It just needs a bit more focus. And as much as I went home a little bit unsatisfied, it was also like the thing that really stoked the fire and kind of poked the bear. And I knew that it was something that I wanted to pursue. Also, it was like the longest race I'd ever done. And I think that year, the longest run I'd done before that was Sierra Zanel. So that, again, my training hadn't been perfect, but it could be better. And maybe that would mean the race could go better.
Did you change anything specific about your training? Kind of rolling into, you ran like a handful of races in 2022, but I assume that like OCC was a big kind of focus for the year. What did you change to come back and finish fifth the following year?
I think the biggest change was actually joining the terrex team. It meant that I was spending time with people and learning from teammates, seeing how they trained, seeing how they lived, seeing how they recovered, how they slept, what they were eating. You know, all of these things play a role. And before that, you know, I was professional, but not actually, like I didn't live my life as you kind of need to. And I learned a lot. I still attribute a lot of my progress to Peter. I got to spend a lot of time with Peter last year, and he really taught me a lot about training and how to get the best from yourself. And I think in training, especially in South Africa, I was doing a lot of, sessions on my own. And there comes a point where you kind of stop being able to push yourself further. And I think that's when it's so helpful to have like this team setting where they can kind of push you a little bit more than you think you're able to do. So yeah, last year I remember saying to Peter, I was like, I need to get good at climbing, like running uphill, because that's where I'm currently losing the most time. So last year was just like vert camp all the time. And we spent a lot of time in Sham. So we were super lucky. Terrex again put us up in a chalet. I think I was there from the beginning of July. So yeah, I spent a lot of time in Sham and just running the trails, getting used to going up, getting used to going down. And I definitely think that was kind of the point where I was like, okay, I can do this. And then obviously 5th place was an improvement. I remember running past Dani and then Dani passing me, and I was never seeing her again. She did so well that race. And yeah, it was cool. It was a good experience, that one.
Yeah, that's I told EmKay, we were chatting offline the other day, and I also noticed you in 5th place and just how strong you were, especially considering like that to me, like people who make big improvements are definitely noteworthy, but to me it's almost like the people that are constantly progressing, because to me their foundation just, in my opinion, is very intact. And so just seeing you make increments constantly, I was like, yeah, Toni McCann is someone to watch for sure. Is part of this kind of like Petter. I also spent some time with Petter this year and couldn't agree more. He's incredibly inspirational, and like you said, there's always room to improve, ways to become and feel more professional in the approach to the sport. I just want to touch upon this really quick. So Toni did a nutrition talk the week before the race or the week of the race, and the content you had in there, I was like, people would pay to listen to this. I know you watered it down, but it was just like incredible, touched upon so many points. Me and Robbie both learned so much. We're like, oh man, there's a lot of room for improvement. But I'm just curious if that interest in nutrition and gaining that knowledge, especially from like a scientific standpoint, came from last year, or if that had been building each year, was that time spent with Petter, et cetera? Because personally, I know EmKay is also a lot into the science of the sport, but to me, that is such a critical thing that can make a huge difference if you can figure it out. So I'm curious where like you became fascinated with it.
Well, I actually studied dietetics in high school, my honors year in university. So I have a background in nutrition, dietetics, but that background is obviously based very much in like the clinical setting and public health. But it gave me a really solid foundation of understanding of just nutrition in general. And I think then translating that into the sports side of things and just being generally interested in like doing the research and understanding how your body processes things differently at different intensities, and how people react to different things, I think has been something that's been growing. And I guess actually I would say most recently, actually, I've found an interest in understanding it because I see so many people struggle with it. So yeah, I mean, it's a lot of my own research, and I'm actually going to go back and study again at the end of the year, specifically within high performance nutrition. So I'm super excited about it. But yeah, I guess food is always just food in general, outside of like the health or the performance side of things. Food has always been like the thing that I love. And I think the nutrition side of things stemmed from that initially, and maybe not such a healthy way. But it's definitely grown from that, and is now more of the scientific side of like, how can we get the best of out of ourselves using this, one of the tools that we can optimize.
Yeah, I know Dani and I have chatted a lot about this, like when we run together and stuff, but there's still like this half and half, I think, in our world where it's like half of the people are like, oh, I don't need to eat for an effort that long. And then the other half of us are like, no, you should eat. Like the performance that you can get out of yourself just from like dialing in your nutrition, even for like a 2-hour effort, is just mind blowing. And so I think it's cool that athletes like you are putting on a panel the week of, the race to show like, hey, this works. Like this is the science behind it. And go watch me win this race doing it.
I think this was actually one of the first races where like I had planned my nutrition and actually hit the marks that I was going for. You can plan as much as you want, but things change all the time. And I think that's really important, just to be able to pivot really, if things aren't going right. But this last race was the first time I think it's gone really right. But again, just goes to show, like if you dial it in, like you could actually have a really good day. Who knows? Yeah, definitely. And I want to talk about this year's race, but I feel like we got to talk after like OCC last year. You went to Otter Trail and had like a phenomenal day, and you broke a course record that like both Ruth and Holly had a chance to break in the past, but hadn't. So like, tell us about that race. And I'm just curious if that kind of also gave you like, because in our heads, that was like a big step up for you. In your head, was that a big step up? Yeah. So that record that was at the Otter was actually set by Holly the year she won in 2018. So, it's an international record set by someone as strong as Holly. I think when Holly's at her prime, man, she can be unstoppable. And over that terrain specifically, she's used to fell races and really technical, muddy terrain. So like, that's her race. That's a race that she could do really well in. And I remember starting that race and running next to a guy, and he looked at me and he was like, wow, you're really going for it. And I was like, hell yeah, I am. And yeah, it was just, I guess, one of those days again that just really clicked. I've run that race a lot. I've run it almost every year since 2018. So I know the trail. I know what I'm in for. I knew how to push and where to push, how to feel for it. And I think all of those things really played a role in that race for sure. But I was also really fit. I'd just come off OCC. I'd been spending a bit of time in Annecy. I had to hang around for some visa issues. So I was in Annecy, and the trails around here are kind of technical, so it kind of fit the training that I needed to do. And I went there, and I don't know, I think I was riding the high from OCC. A good position or performance at a race can really kind of fuel you. And I had missed the record, I think, by 30 seconds the year before, so I knew it was possible. But I didn't think I'd be able to break it by, I think it was 3 or 4 minutes or something. So I took a couple minutes off her record, and I think that was a big confidence boost, definitely, because it's Holly. It's a really someone. It's not a no one record. She's definitely a force. So it was cool to do that and to kind of validate the performance that I'd done in 2018 as well. I think often we can go, it was just a once off. I don't know how that happened, but going back and being able to better a time that was set, it definitely validates a performance for sure. So yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Holly on technical terrain is terrifyingly amazing. And that trail, I mean, for people who don't know this race, from my understanding is each year it changes directions. So there's a course record for each direction. And you're kind of just like meandering on and off the coast there. So you will go up off the sand, but then some parts you're like running through ocean water and running where the waves are crashing. And personally, growing up in Santa Barbara, that rock is very slippery when it gets wet, if it's similar sandstone and stuff. So yeah, very, very technical, cool race where I would imagine too, mentally you had to be engaged constantly because it's constantly going up and down and very windy stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. You're running through indigenous forests and, there's lots of routes, and then you kind of hop onto like rocky sections. I think the longest climb is something like 100 meters of elevation gain. So you look at the profile and you go, man, this shouldn't be hard. And then you run it and you're like, oh my gosh, why is this so hard?
It's those like, punchy hills are way worse than like long grinders.
Yeah, because you can't get into a rhythm, right? Like you have to constantly be changing. Your muscles are constantly swapping between going up and going down, and then like navigating technical terrain. And you're mentally having to be engaged the whole time. It's like exhausting in so many ways. But that's also why it's so fun. And it's an incredibly beautiful part of the world. Like I would definitely recommend, if anyone was ever in the area or around South Africa at the time, you know, definitely try and get an entry to the race, because it's spectacular. It's truly an experience.
Yeah. It looks amazing. Well, speaking about the benefits of being familiar with terrain, earlier this year, you moved to Chamonix, which you've already noted a couple times being in that terrain, you think had a huge benefit for potentially your performance this year. Why did you move to Chamonix? Why now? And how are you liking it?
So after Otta last year, I just felt really like mentally drained. It had been a long year. I'd run a couple of races. I kind of felt like I just emptied the bucket and I had no more to really give. I was finding it hard to motivate myself to train and to like get out there. So I was like, you know what? I need a change. I need to do something that makes me excited. And I was like, cool, I'm gonna go and experience winter, because you know we don't get snow really in South Africa, or not snow that you can ski on. So I was like, I'm gonna go and do a ski season. I'm gonna go and learn to ski up mountains and down mountains. So I went in December, went up to Norway to visit Peter, and it was an interesting experience. I think the day before I left, it was like 36 degrees Celsius in Cape Town. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. Don't ask me. It was hot, really hot.
It's very hot, yeah. It's like almost 100 degrees.
It was boiling. And then I was like packing my bags to go to Norway and packing all of these like thick Gore-Tex jackets. I arrived in Norway actually in this. Interesting coincidence. And I think it was minus 18 degrees. So there was a massive temperature difference. So unprepared. It's like the most ridiculous story ever. But yeah, I ended up going to Norway for December and tried to learn to ski there, which was a lot of fun. Didn't do much skiing actually, but really enjoyed the winter. And then I moved to Chamonix and joined our teammate Kim Schreiber in Le Lavancher in the valley. And really got into the ski touring, bought myself a ski setup and truly just fell in love with it. I think it was a really necessary break for me from running only training, because, you know, living in Cape Town and then coming to spend summers here in Europe, I was just running all year. And I feel like I'd done that since I'd started running. So having that change in stimulus and like a mental break from just pure running training was really, really needed. And I got to the start of the running season now this year, and I just felt so excited about it again, which was for me the biggest benefit of doing a winter season. And yeah, I guess I've always loved Chamonix. I've always loved France. I love the culture. The people can be interesting, but I mostly love them too. I love the language. I guess I have many reasons to stay now, not just the trails, special people as well.
My husband had a very similar experience this winter where he was just like so burnt out and spent all winter on skis. And now he's like so stoked on running. So I totally see where you're at there. And I'm curious, do you feel like a ski training helped you become an even better climber this year?
Definitely. I think, absolutely. There's no two ways about it. You know, it's like zone 2 training perfect, but like the form that you have to use to do ski touring it's exactly uphill running. It really makes your like hip flexors really strong, and I always felt like that was something that I was quite weak with. And then obviously like the alpine side of things as well, going down, you've really got to engage your glutes, and like it's so much more than I expected, honestly. But I definitely feel like it gave me a really good base to build onto for my running season.
Yeah. And from my understanding too, like that valley, it's not really a resort, right? It's like almost exclusively backcountry, or is it kind of a mix of both?
There, to be honest, I did mostly on piste skiing. So there are quite a few like different resort, like groomed trails. Not trails, pistes.
What does that mean?
Where
on
they're like
resort.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I think the only place I did backcountry skiing was in the Beaufortin with Jace and Jim. But it was really bad. And I fell a lot. It's really, really hard, but it was super fun. Like I enjoyed being bad at something again, you know. I think it was fun to have to put my ego aside and like be okay with being like with the 3-year-olds falling on my butt, because everyone around me had been on skis since they were like, you know, knee height. And you're like, I'm almost 30. I'm learning with you. But it was really cool. It was a good lesson in humility too.
Yeah. No, that's great. I was going to imagine in South Africa, you probably didn't ski much.
No.
I've heard Jim talking about, oh yeah. I've heard Jim talking about like getting his butt kicked by Francois's kids. So are those the same 3-year-olds that were kicking your butt?
Yeah. I mean, all of them. They're on the slopes and they're like,
yeah.
You're like, okay, I'm coming.
I love that
really
so much. Well, so I'm curious because your first race of the season was Transvulcania, which is at the very beginning of May. So at what point did you switch your focus kind of from uphill skiing to like getting back onto your feet? Because that's like a pretty fast course. So I don't know how much, you know, you had to kind of prepare for that on your feet instead of just on skis.
So I think I had made a point throughout winter to keep running. Obviously the volume was super low, but it was just making sure that I kind of maintained some sort of running stimulus. And then I think I kind of switched maybe at the beginning of February to like a bit more focused running. The trails at that point, they were lower down, they were mostly clear. So I could do more running and actually get some elevation. And then at the end of February, I had run like a really small low-key race in Grenoble, which was a lot of fun, really fast and super flowing. It felt like a 30K cross-country race, which was interesting, but really cool. But yeah, I had definitely tried to maintain some sort of running fitness throughout the winter as well, so that when I did transition, it wasn't such a shock to the system.
Yeah. No, we definitely, talking to a few other athletes on this podcast, have gotten the recommendation from them that, it depends on how much you're skiing, like the ratio of like on skis versus running. But that actually is one of the most critical parts of that season, is when you're transitioning, not to do too much too fast, because you are getting the benefits, but your body still hasn't been getting that same kind of pounding. But it definitely seemed like you nailed it. And so with Transvulcania, it's pretty warm. I've heard it's pretty sandy, also very technical. How did you feel during that race? Because you won it, and you won it in a new course record from my understanding. And at least I saw that in a caption or two. Yeah. And seeing you come down that finish line, you just had the biggest smile on your face. You could like feel the excitement through the photo. So what did it mean for you to get that win?
I mean, it was the race that I was using to get into OCC. So obviously it was like a necessary podium for me. But I think more than more than just the podium finish, it was the fact that I was even able to race. As much as the transition from skiing into running was pretty smooth, I ended up doing too much, the classic, and forgot about the fact that life and travel and work and all of these things are really stressful. Not just running training is stressful. There's so many things that compound into that as well and can actually affect you physically. And I definitely found I had done too much in April. So I got to the start line of Transvulcania with a tendinopathy in my psoas, which, you know, at the time I was like, I'm not sure I can race. The week before the race, I didn't do anything. I was kind of sidelined and I was like, there's no way, I can hardly walk. But decided to start just because I was there. I was in La Palma. So I was like, okay, well, I'm here. I may as well just try. And I had no pain on the race. You know, I feel like I am strong enough to be able to pull out if I'm in pain. But the race it went really well. I felt nothing. And even 2 or 3 days later, I was like, I'm fine. Like whatever I had before is gone. Like it's weird. But yeah, the race itself went again really well. I had a plan. My plan was to keep Emilia, also one of our teammates who was there with us. And she's a super strong uphill runner, man. She is like flies. So my goal was to just kind of keep her in sight. I knew I probably wasn't going to keep up with her the whole way, but if I could keep her within striking distance, like I could potentially do something on the descent. And that's kind of how the race panned out. You know, she pulled, I think at one stage, maybe a 3-minute gap on me, and I ended up catching her halfway through the descent on the way into town. So tactically, the race went really well. My nutrition went really well. The course really suited me. You know, the downhill is super technical and rocky. And yeah, I felt great on the race. It felt like the training that I'd done beforehand was perfectly suited for that. You know, it's as much as it's technical, it's also really fast. So I had done a lot of speed work and I'd felt like my times were improving. So I went in confident that if I was able to run, I would be able to do well. And it did. I mean, it happened the way in my head I wanted it to happen. But unfortunately, I did pay the price for pushing myself so hard and knowingly running on something that I probably shouldn't have. So yeah, I finished the race and I ended up having a bone edema in my femur head, where the psoas kind of inserts into the bone. So yeah, that kind of sidelined me for a couple weeks, and I ended up buying a bike, and I was like, cool, gonna give this cross training thing a go, which I really enjoyed actually for the first couple weeks.
The way you were setting up that story, I had a feeling that's where this was going.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no, she feels good, but it's not going to feel good in a couple of days.
No, yeah.
So you were selected for like World Champs team. Was this the injury that kind of kept you out of that as well? Because that was only a month later. Okay.
Yeah.
So you were on the bike. Did you see yourself still maybe able to run that? I don't really know much about bone edemas, or did you kind of know like when you started cross training that it was not going to happen?
I had been given conflicting advice about the injury. You know, some people were saying, you know, it's just a bone bruise. You know, you can run on it. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be sore, but like it shouldn't get worse. But I didn't have a good feeling about that. And I didn't want to, you know, it's when I have injuries, I'm like, nah, like stay off of it, be smart. You know, world champs, obviously everyone wants to represent their country at some point. What an honor that is, you know. And it definitely felt like I was letting my country down, but I felt like I would be letting myself down more if I didn't honor the injury and actually respect the recovery process. So yeah, I went along. I knew that going along was going to be really hard to have to sit on the sideline and cheer, but I wanted to be there and to support, and I'm really glad I did, honestly. It was a really cool experience.
Yeah. And you guys had a great team. It was you, Meg McKenzie, and then who was the third woman that was on the team?
Bianca
Bianca.
Tarberton. Yeah, and then we had some strong guys as well, Kane Riley, Daniel Klaassen. So yeah, it was a really cool event actually. And we even actually got some like track athletes out to running in South Africa. They came for the up and down classic.
Nice.
They crushed it as well. Like a lot of them, it was kind of their first trail race, but it was really cool to see them. My roommate, Nwabisa, she is an insanely fast 10K runner. Unfortunately, she had a bad race, but like, yeah, I'm super excited to see her come back. Like, I think she'll crush.
Yeah, I feel like that would have been a perfect introductory course for someone coming from track also with the road and stuff like that. When we were doing the preview, I kind of like took over the women's, basically what would have been our race distance. And yeah, I kind of was like, it was kind of up in the air of like, who can win this? Who's on the podium? And I was like, I'm pretty confident Toni would for sure be on the podium, if not be a strong contender to win. And then you obviously weren't able to participate. And then I saw Amelia get fifth and I was like, yeah, Toni would have been right in there for sure. But we're getting so close to OCC. So one more unfortunate thing happens while you're there. I just feel like the public needs to know because it adds to the story of the amazingness that just happened. But what happened while you're at Worlds? Yeah.
Oh, man. So the blows kind of just kept coming. I was cycling between aid stations on the long trail course, and I mean, I must have been going faster than in my head I would think I was, because I wiped out. I was just going around a corner on some gravel road and I just like skidded out. And, you know, the shoulder has been through a lot already, but I broke my collarbone again, fourth time. So I think, you know, it's probably pretty weak at this point. But man, when I fell and I felt it go, I was just like, this is it. You know, this is my season done. I was a wreck. Shame. I feel so sorry for the guy who found me on the trail. But they were great. Kudos to the Austrian like health services. They were really, really efficient. So thank you to them if they ever listen to this. But yeah, I guess falling and breaking my collarbone meant that all the training that I was doing on the bike, you know, when you're cycling, if you're cycling outside, you can do easily like 2 to 3 hours without even realizing how long you've been out. Sitting on the bike trainer, doing 2 hours, another story. So hard. So when I fell and I knew that I was going to be on the indoor trainer for at least 4 to 5 weeks while my shoulder healed, well, actually ended up being longer than that. I was pretty devastated. It was a really hard pill to swallow because I just started running as well. It was like, I think I'd done 2 runs and I was like finally seeing the end of the psoas injury and the bone edema felt like it was getting better. So it was, it was a hard pill to swallow, falling and like going, oh my gosh, this is 6 weeks of no running, because I can't, you can't run with a broken collarbone. I later found out I'd also broken a rib, which ended up being way more painful actually than the shoulder. It was just one of those unfortunate things. And I don't know, I feel like you have to put a positive spin on something like that. So looking back, I'm like really grateful because I think if it hadn't happened, I probably would have come back too soon from my psoas injury. And that's kind of the story I'm telling myself to at least spin it in a good way.
Well, I'm incredibly impressed with what you did on the bike. I know that it was definitely not fun, but I kept seeing on Instagram just you like dripping sweat in your garage. And I like personally have never been able to bike like that. When I was injured in college a couple of times, like I would bike for like 80 minutes and be like, I'm done. Like I can't. So I am so impressed with what you did. And so you were on the bike for quite a while and then you started running like like 5 weeks before OCC, basically, maybe 6?
Yeah. So I think I had started running maybe like 3 days a week at the beginning of July. And then every week after that, I kind of slowly introduced a little bit more. I think I did like one speed session in July. That was towards the end of the month. And I remember my calves being so tight after that I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do another one of these. I'm not a runner anymore. But the focus for those weeks were definitely, I started with run walks, and started super slow with hikes, and really didn't want to push it. I mean, my ribs meant that I was really unstable on the trails. You forget how much you have to use your torso and your core to stabilize yourself. So like I was very cautious of that, and it took actually a lot of confidence away from me because I was always scared about falling and hurting myself again. So it took a really long time to feel like I was able to run confidently and smoothly again. And then, I think from the beginning of August, I kind of like fully swapped over to running only. And then I bought the bike in like once or twice a week as a recovery session. But July was, if I look back, probably more of my hours were still on the bike, with maybe the last 2 weeks of July being a little bit more running than biking, but still predominantly on the bike.
Yeah. It was almost like, because you did a lot of that in 2020 also. So I'm sure maybe you had some maybe some PTSD from being on the bike.
PTSD.
Yeah.
Luckily, thank goodness for Zwift. Honestly, like as much as some of their workouts are so horrid, like really hardcore, it's super motivating. Actually, it's definitely it definitely got the best out of me on the bike. But I also very much exhausted my Netflix account. I no longer have anything to watch.
No, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, to me, I just immediately think of like, there's still gains to be made in cross training. And at least in the moments that I have had stints of cross train, mostly in college, similar to EmKay, where, I had a bone injury or something like that. The only way that I saw gains is if I was constantly attentive, like nearly every single session, very highly focused. And you can push harder because you're not pounding your body as much. And so for you to to me, you still improved. Like Transvulcania was a great performance, but if you look at Transvulcania versus OCC, like you improved, and you mostly did that on a bike. So I can just so many kudos to you, because I can only imagine that you were really plugged in constantly, like able to push yourself. And that to me sounds incredibly difficult that only someone who is truly very focused could pull off. And I think it also is a testament that you definitely worked your butt off during the winter, because you had such an incredible base of strength from that. And so, yeah, huge appreciation to you. You were plugged in all year. I know it was hard, and probably much harder than if you were able to run, but it paid off for OCC. So I hope you can give past Toni a pat on the back that, yeah, you were just incredibly plugged in that entire time. So you're running now. I remember when I was there in July, I don't think we got a chance to run. And I remember you saying I feel like a baby giraffe coming back from running and stuff like that. And then maybe it was 3 weeks out from OCC, you did a pretty big week. And so what was kind of the choice behind that? Because it paid off. Yeah.
Yeah, so there were two things that I really wanted to do before OCC. One was to do a race, because I felt like mentally I needed to push. I needed to have a hard downhill push. And Davos X Trails was that for me. It was a runnable course relatively, it only had 1,500 meters of vert, but it was a chance to do a hard effort and to give myself the confidence that I could run that far again. You know, I had managed a couple longer runs before it, but, you know, in my head, 42Ks felt really far at that point. So doing a race was important for me, which I managed to tick off my list with no hiccups. And then, 3 weeks out, I decided, I mean, I don't know why in my head I decided this, but I was like, I need to do a big week. I need to do a solid week of just time on my feet. So, I mean, I think I did something, and this is my biggest training week ever in my life. I've never run this far ever, which for someone who's a road athlete or comes from a road background might be like, it's nothing. But I did a big week for me with a ton of vert. And in my head, it was more just that, like, what I had lacked on the bike wasn't my threshold training. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't the hard aerobic efforts or anaerobic efforts. It was just the conditioning. Like, I just wasn't conditioned for 3,500 meters of ascent and descent, and like purely the descent, you know, that concentric loading, that eccentric loading is like really hard. And when you're coming back from injury, like, I think that's the biggest thing that we always lack. So for me, that week was just about loading my body and creating like micro tears in my muscles that could then create the adaptations to make myself stronger, hopefully, in the following week. It worked to some extent. It didn't work in other ways. But yeah, it was one of those mental things that I just kind of needed to get through and to do to make myself believe that I could cover the 56Ks and that I could do the climbing and the descending and not fall apart.
Yeah, I think that Zwift does those workouts, they do a really good job of keeping you conditioned to like climb really well. But I think that's really interesting that you totally just like had put that big weekend there to kind of just beat yourself up, because Dani and I were and Francesco and I were talking about this on Good Morning Mont Blanc, that the great trail runners are able to transition between those really hard downhills straight back into uphills. And if you haven't been running, like, that's so hard to do. So I mean, you're doing it all right. I'm sure it felt really terrible in the moment, but
yeah. Actually, one of the workouts that I'd done was specifically that workout, like an up, down, up workout. And it was brutal, man. It was so rough. And I finished, I think I did one, and I was like, I can't do any more. I can't do any more of these. And thank goodness it had been like automatically uploaded to my watch as a workout. So like it was beeping for me. If it wasn't beeping for me and I was just timing for myself, I would never have finished that workout, because after every one, I was like, that's it. I'm not doing another one. And then the beep would go and I'd be, fine, I'm going to do it.
Twist my arm, I'll do it.
I got to the end of the workout and I felt terrible, but it was like another like pat on the back. I think, you know, all of these hard workouts, yes, they're helping you physically as well improve, but every time you get through something that's really difficult, I feel like you mentally just like get a little bit harder and you're able to endure a little bit more and you're able to sit with that discomfort a little bit more. And I think that was actually more so than, you know, the physical side of the training on the bike and the running training that I did. The amount of discomfort that I've had to sit through this year, I think, has been a really big growth for me, because I've never had to experience it like this before. And yeah, I think that's a big part of ultra running. You know, it's not comfortable. There's a lot of moments where it's going to be really terrible. And to be able to sit through that and endure that and be like, cool, I'm in this really horrible position right now. I feel terrible, but like things could improve. So just keep going. Like keep pushing it a little bit more and see if things get better. So yeah, I think that was a big growth and big learning for me this year.
And that's definitely the mindset that you need to go into a race like this, a 6-hour effort where you're pushing as hard as you can. And so let's skip forward to OCC, because I said before we started this podcast, and I knew it would happen, that we are going to have to cut this off at some point. So take us through kind of like the week before, like the morning of the race. Where are you at mentally going into OCC?
I feel like I had gone into the race. I mean, the whole week I felt weirdly calm, I think. Or not weirdly calm. I think I had accepted the fact that my training had not been what I wanted it to be. Having missed a bunch of running training, I had accepted that, maybe it wasn't going to be my year to podium or to better my time from last year, or to better my position from last year. But maybe this was just my year of growth and learning, and that I'd kind of come to terms with and settled into that idea. So I was pretty calm, actually. A lot of the nerves that I normally feel, I think one of the things that I'm quite good at is actually managing nerves. But I didn't have any of that this year. And I think it was mostly because I just was like, cool, well, whatever happens, c'est la vie. And I'll come back next year and hopefully be better prepared. But I think taking that expectation away from myself was probably the biggest strength that I went into the race with. Because I never felt like I needed to be anywhere in the race. It was just like, run to how you're feeling. And thank goodness I felt good. It's kind of, I think it was the calmness that translated into just being relaxed and never feeling tensed and stressed about where I was or what I was doing or how I was feeling. It was just like, just being able to run happy, actually.
Yeah, sorry, EmKay. Yeah, I would say so too. Like, from being your teammate and being around you. I think it also helps, like, going back to the terrex thing, just being around so many seasoned professionals, who like are used to being in that atmosphere. And I was personally incredibly impressed when I think it had to have been race week where you didn't know if you were feeling something and you were supposed to go run, and the direction or the instruction given to you is like, don't run, don't do that. And you were like, yep, I'm taking today off. And you were totally fine with that. Whereas I feel that maybe some younger runners would have been like, no, I need to run. Like, the race is this week. I need to feel that. I need to feel like a runner. And to me, that just really spoke to a lot of what you went through this year. I'm sure in previous years where you knew you were going to be okay. It was more important that you got to the start line than anything else. So that really stood out to me. And then, even race day morning, you were just like so calm, and ready for it. And you didn't seem nervous at all. So it also was calming for me to like be around that as well. So race day goes and it starts. And from what I know, because I wasn't there, you went out really fast. Like, so how did you feel? Because I was looking at some of the splits and the front of the race went out probably 5 minutes faster than the front of the race went out last year up to Champagne Lock. And so did you realize what was happening and you're like, heck yeah, I feel good today? Or how did that kind of unfold?
This is going to sound terrible, but honestly, like, when we went out, it felt super comfortable. Like, the pace didn't feel super hard for me. And I remember seeing Ali fly off, and actually, EmKay, I saw you ahead of me, and I was like, you know what? Like, this feels okay. Like, this feels manageable. And then I remember looking down at my watch and being like, oh shit, well, this is fast.
We were flying.
Yeah. But because I was feeling okay and I was like, this doesn't feel like out of my comfort zone right now, I'm just going to roll with it. And that's kind of the theme for the day, actually. Like, it was every time I would like look at my watch or look at my heart rate or kind of check in with my body, and I'd be like, you know what, this all still feels fine. And I mean, the front of the race was fast and Ali flew off. And this comes with experience of the route. This is the third year I've run this race now, so I know the route. I've run this terrain, but this is also not my first international race, and I know people always go out hard. So I kind of went in with the same mindset that I went in with Transvulcania. Like, if the front runners are going to go, keep them in sight, but don't get caught up in that like nervous, tense adrenaline. Just run your own race, but don't tap off so much so that you lose sight of the front. And yeah, I mean, I guess I just felt good. So I rolled with it, basically.
I love those days. They don't come often. So like when you have them, you got to really take advantage of them. And
Absolutely.
so you were kind of like up in the top group of like, 3 to 5 people, pretty much the whole race. And so I'm curious, like at what point did you know that you were going to win? Because you weren't in the front for a long time.
Honestly, I think it only really sunk in at the top of Flagey, so the last climb. Before that, the race is still long. I think I had passed Miao Yao on the climb up to Col de Balme. And from that point on, I was running up front, and it was, whenever you're running up front, you're always running scared. You know that someone at any point can come and catch you. And based on the depth of the field this year, I was under no illusion that there was a huge possibility for someone to come up behind me. I mean, that's in one way hugely motivating to like really get your butt into gear every time you can run, but it's also scary, and it's intimidating. And I do feel like that extra little bit of adrenaline that you're always running with is also really exhausting. Like you have to mentally be turned on always as well. But again, like that training on the bike where you're sitting in really uncomfortable positions and you kind of just have to sit there, that's kind of, I feel like that was training for that moment where I was like, okay, this is uncomfortable, but like just roll with it. Like you'll be fine. But yeah, I definitely didn't expect to run alone for so long. And only at the top of Flagey where I kind of got a split that I was like, oh, wow, okay, I've got some time, I can relax. Like that was kind of when I was like, okay, well, maybe I've got this. Like maybe this is my year, which is wild still to think.
Yeah, your split from Argentière up to Les Flagey and back to town was pretty insane. Like you definitely did not take your foot off the pedal at any point, because when I saw in Argentière, like you had a pretty sizable lead, and I don't know, in my gut I was like, oh, she's got this, but you did not let up at all on that last climb.
It's so interesting to hear you say that, because in my head when I think back on the race, I'm like, I feel like I walked up that whole climb.
That climb is just so brutal. Like, I feel like no matter how good you feel like you're walking up that climb.
Yeah, it's terrible. And like, if you run that portion of the race on its own, just in training, it's like, it's chilled. It's not so bad. But man, at the end of the race, it's horrible. I'm so glad that everyone always feels shit because we're all together on that one.
Yeah, I admittedly had a different feeling last year. I was like, oh, I crushed that climb. And then I looked back at myself. I was like, wow, Dani, you were barely running. But I was like, yeah, I smashed that. And it was like one of my slowest climbs ever. So
the last time I ran that climb, I thought, oh, like going into the race, I was like, this is where I'm going to crush because it's like runnable. And then I was like walking. I was like, oh my God, what is happening to me out here?
Oh man,
I just love it because it's so relatable for so many people. The climb up to Les Flagey, we've all felt it in our bones if you've raced in Chamonix. All right, so you finish, you realize you've won, you're coming into town. I can only imagine the emotions, just like so much hard work, so much just consistent work on and off the bike throughout the entire year. I was crying the whole time you were running in on that finish line. And you crossed the line in an insane time, because when you, I, and Kimmy ran that portion, like the new section, the week of, or maybe a week out. EmKay also ran it. And I remember when we ran it, we were just kind of like lollygagging, right? Like hiking, jogging, blah, blah, blah. And the part from Triant to Col de Balme took us like 70 minutes, right? And we were like I don't know. But racing the previous year, I had one of the better splits on that part. Not saying that like cocky, but just like as it was.
It was
that,
fast.
And it was like right under 90 minutes. And in my head, I was like, this is going to take off probably 30 minutes off. And if someone is having an exceptional day, they're going to run 40 minutes faster. You almost ran an hour faster than Shayla the previous year. I'm sure you know this, but like, we're just going to say it to your face again.
It's incredible.
It's insane. Like you blew our minds. You probably, anyone who actually like knows this race, knows what you did. I think some people still maybe don't realize, so we're going to tell them. But that was an insane performance, especially over like that period of time of racing. Do you do you realize that? Is my question. Because you've ran all versions of the course. You know the course too. So you should know, right?
I mean, I think, for me, I hate the idea of comparison, but like, and especially when it's one of the things that I've tried to avoid is comparing myself to previous versions of myself this year specifically, because I always like, if I look back last year, this time, I would have said before the race that I was a stronger runner, more prepared. But when I look at my splits from previous years, I was consistently under my splits from the previous years by quite a substantial amount. And I don't know, I think more so than anything that's really satisfying is just to see that personal growth. Obviously, like, I ran over an hour faster than my time last year. Like that's stupid. Why? How did that happen? I don't know. I can't tell you. It's slowly sinking in what I did, but also, I don't know. I don't know if I've still quite comprehended it, honestly. It's one of those things that I'm not sure I ever will. It was like a very, very overwhelming experience that I haven't quite been able to like verbalize in any comprehensible language yet.
I think what you were talking about earlier, just like letting go of expectations and running with joy, like that's a huge part of it. Like, you just, especially as professional athletes, we get like really caught up in the time and the place and, like where we're at. And so often we forget that this is like something that we do for fun. Mm-hmm. And when you can remember to have fun, like those big performances happen.
Yeah. I fully agree. And like people always are like, oh, you're smiling so much. How are you smiling so much when you're running? And I'm like, well, actually I choose to enjoy these moments. Like I choose to use the crowd to make me happy and to like gain energy from that. Because I think as soon as you take yourself too seriously and you're like, I don't know, you like sit too internally and you then feel everything, right? And it's like, as soon as you cast yourself outside of yourself and actually just take in where you are, and like the crowds were insane this year. It was so cool. Like seeing Dani in Argentina, obviously my heart broke to know that you had dropped out, but like to see you there cheering it, like it really gives you so much energy and so much joy. And like, I don't know, that for whatever split second you're outside of your body and like you're not experiencing the discomfort again or anymore. And I think for me, like going into OCC, having let go of those expectations, same with Transvulcania, like my goal was to smile whenever I came past someone, because it was just my way to like force myself to enjoy the moment, knowing that it's a privilege to be out there. So yeah, like the smiling is intentional. It's not just like, I'm not just a naturally smiley person. Like I've got a pretty nasty resting bitch face. But like the smiling is completely intentional. It's a reminder to enjoy and be present and like, have fun. It's fun. Actually, the cutest story is when I finished, my partner was at the finish line and he was like, the first thing he said to me was, did you have fun? And I don't remember my answer, but apparently I said so much. So good thing. I clearly had fun.
That's awesome.
And smiling, like there's actually some research out there that like smiling instead of frowning, like sends your body signals that like, I feel good. Like I'm having a good day. And when you like are frowning or like your face is like not relaxed, it's the total opposite. Your body's like, oh, we are having a bad day. Like what is happening out here?
Yep. Moral of the story. If anyone takes anything away from this conversation, just smile.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. I think we all hope and dream that those days where it feels effortless, almost like you're in so much pain, but your body is responding to everything your mind is asking. We always hope it's going to land on a big day. And so, yeah, it was so cool to watch you just flying through those streets and have the performance you did after just so much hard stuff this year. Like there's so many things this year where you could have just been like, I'm not racing OCC. Like I'm not even going to get on that start line. It didn't go as planned. It didn't go perfect, but instead you decided to embrace that, almost like imperfect buildup, but also maybe perfect, like it was meant to be for you to get there. So yeah, it was so cool to see you having so much fun out there and having that race. Two more things I wanted to talk about shoes really quick, not as like a shameless brand plug, but more so the we'll talk about shoes and then we'll get into what's next and then we'll wrap up. But the shoes that you chose are pretty high, a stack height, right? And like typically for our races that are shorter, people tend to go with shorter stack height, having closer to the ground feeling, etc. So kind of just like provide some insight as to why you chose those shoes over something that's more minimal, because the team has been selling me more on those versus what my gut tells me, or what historically my gut has told me. So yeah, can you just provide some insight there?
It's interesting because I was always, coming from ultra, I was running in like the super minimal. I think that shoe that the King MT, I think had like a 16 mil stack height. So it was really nothing. And like, there was no cushioning in that shoe. It was basically running barefoot. So I historically come from that background, like really minimal, super bare, like not cushy at all. But I think I kind of got converted a bit last year. I started doing all of my easy like recovery runs in the afternoon, actually in the Boston, which any road runner might gasp and say blasphemy because I'm running on the trails in a pair of Boston road shoes. But I loved it. Like I loved the extra cushion it gave me. I loved the plate. I thought it gave me like a little bit more bounce and responsiveness when, maybe I'm running on tired legs. So I really enjoyed that. And I always used to be like, oh man, it would be amazing if Adidas came out with a shoe that was like the Boston, but with more of a trail grip and a trail upper, obviously, to kind of lock your foot in a bit better. So when the prototype and what we now know as the Gravic Speed Ultra came out, I was like, hell yeah, this is my shoe. In saying that, it took me a long time to get used to. I think it took me, a good 2 weeks of running consistently in it and a couple blisters to like get my foot used to that upper before I was like comfortable to be in it. And like figuring out the lacing to really lock my foot in there. I think you don't love every shoe instantly. And this was maybe not love at first sight, but it's definitely a happily ever after. Like it's definitely my now go-to trail shoe. I still think that it's important because it's got carbon rods to have it like as part of a rotation. I know we don't all have the luxury of having like a shoe rotation, but like if you can afford 2 pairs of shoes where one is carbon plated and the other isn't, like I think it's important to use carbon plate for like workouts or long runs specific for whatever race you're running in. So like don't use them as your primary training shoe because I think your feet then get weak. Your feet are the base of your entire body. Like it's really important to keep them strong and flexible and, all the things. My physio would be proud of me. I do love the Gravic Speed Ultra. I think it's so responsive. It's super comfortable. Like if you're not comfortable on technical terrain, the shoe's not for you. I think because of the high stack height, it really takes some getting used to, but yeah, it can also be quite a hazard if you maybe don't have super strong ankles or you're not super comfortable with the higher stack. You know, it's maybe not a shoe for everyone, but I think, yeah, for me, it was the perfect shoe for this race.
Yeah. And I like EmKay of last year would be like, why are you saying this? But EmKay of this year was like, wow, this course is like super runnable. I actually changed my shoes last minute because I was like, oh my God, the shoes that I plan on wearing are not going to be fast enough. But last year I would have been like, I'm going to die out here.
You're getting converted.
Yeah, exactly. But we should probably wrap up. So last question, what is next? Do you have anything for the rest of the year? Or are you just going to go sit on the beach and drink some margaritas or something?
Oh, that sounds so nice. But, well, actually, for now, I've decided that it's going to be a good 2-week recovery. And recovery is not sitting on my butt. It's, you know, I'm sitting on the trainer again. Weirdly, clearly I like torture. But sitting on the trainer, just spinning my legs. And, you know, I had my first like sort of run back yesterday and it didn't feel great. So I was like, I'm actually just going to keep biking until running feels good again. And yeah, so I've given myself 2 weeks before I also decide on, at least 2 weeks before I decide on what's next. I'm definitely going back home. So Cape Town, I'm hoping will be the place that I can do my kind of last race of the season. But yeah, there's, you know, talk of Templiers, there's talk of Cappadocia, Ultra Trail Cape Town, Otta, you know, the season still feels early. I know, you know, Chamonix and UTMB are like the World Series final, but actually there's still so much of the season left. So first focus is recover. And yeah, I guess I'll see after that. But I think I've got one more race in me. It's just not decided which one yet.
Yeah, that's incredibly smart for sure. Let the body recover and then see what you're excited about. That's definitely a hard lesson I learned last year, was already having something on my calendar and feeling like I needed to get back for it. And for us, like OCC, I think is your longest race also. Yeah. Potentially. Yeah. So, yeah, that's incredibly smart. And yeah, just like enjoy the victory still. I think many of our personalities is, wow, I achieved my goal. That was amazing. And then the next week you're like, all right, what's next? But it's, no, you, especially for you with the year that you had, I think it's incredibly important. Like, yeah, have a couple more margaritas, victory, and then you can shift gears, like you said, to the fall season. Yeah.
I think a really nice lesson I learned actually from, Tom Evans, he said to me when I finished, he was like, you know, really soak this up, because big wins like this don't come around all that often. Like, you know, we dream of them. So when they come, actually take it in, sit with it for a while. Like, don't be too quick to move on to the next goal. So yeah, thank you, Tom, for the advice. I am taking that.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Well, Toni, it has been an absolute pleasure. We know people are going to love hearing about your background and just your journey up to this point. It's been incredibly inspiring. And yeah, EmKay, you got anything else to close it out?
No, I don't think so. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, you guys are amazing, both of you. So thank you. Super excited to have chatted with you guys.
Thanks, Toni. This has been the Sub Hub, brought to you by Freetrail.
Just a reminder for you guys that this episode is brought to you by Never Second. Check out the show notes for a link to their website, their Instagram page, and use code SUBHUB25 at checkout to get 25% off of your purchase. That's SUBHUB25.